Welcome to episode 43 of Silver Lining for Learning. My name is Punya Mishra, and I'm Associate Dean and Professor at the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at ASU. I'm joined by Kurt Bonk, Xuange Chen, Chris Didi, and Young Zhao. Kurt and Zhao will be with us on this discussion today, and Chris and Xuange are managing the back channel. So our YouTube live was what people are joining in. I can't believe that this is episode 43. We went live. I look back on March 21st, 2020, and we've been doing this for 10 months, right? So I want to just thank all of you for joining in. I think this has been a good week. The transition to a new administration happened smoothly, which was great. But I think maybe even more important, India beat Australia in the test series, which kept me up late at night. And that is cricket I'm talking about, if people don't know. Also excited to host our guests today. So I think this is, as we were talking just before the show, that the work that Kiran and Aakash have been doing is incredibly impressive. And there is this sort of commitment to learners as drivers of their own education. And I think, as Kiran, I think in one of the quotes that you have is doing good and doing well. So I want to just not talk too much and briefly introduce our guest today, Kiran, Sethi. I think Kiran and I have this one connection that I feel that both of us started from the field of design and ended up in education, but design still inspires, I think, the way we look at education. And I think congratulations to Kiran for the 20th anniversary of the Riverside School. And so another reason for a good week. And looking forward to learning more about how the school started and this focus on this user-centered curriculum and quality learning, and the success that the school has had along multiple dimensions. Also would love to have a conversation around this work of design for change that you've been involved in. And it's sort of like a global phenomena of social entrepreneurship by children. And Aakash is an education leader. He's currently CEO of Quest Alliance, and working at the space of sort of encouraging and supporting young people with 21st century skills, again, framed around self-learning. So welcome to both of you. I hope you're doing well. I'll start with you, Kiran, first. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in education?
Oh, hi, everybody. Big hello from India. Well, how did I end up in education? I had no plans, by the way. I was living a nice life of leisure. I'm a designer by profession, was running my design my design firm, and I was having such fun. And then I became a mother, and then my whole life changed. So I think when my son went to school, I believe there are two things happened. One is, of course, I experienced an education that rewarded compliance over conversation. And pretty much at that point said, my God, this can't be good enough. So as a mother, I think I reacted to what I was witnessing my son was going through. But I think as a designer, I responded. I said, my God, what an opportunity. I'm sure there has to be a better way. So I just took him out of school and I started. I mean, I kind of said that, and like Gandhiji kept saying, he said, you are who you've been waiting for. Nobody else is going to come and change your life. And rather than sit around and blame the system and say, this is the way it's always been and we turned out fine, I think the possibility excited me. And I think that's what kind of set me off. And I wasn't having grand plans. It was my child. So I started in my home. And pretty much that's how the last 20 years have been. It's a small story, but I think the impact of getting the user as ally in the learning journey was so unusual, apparently, in education, because children have always been incidental to the program. That I believe caught people's attention. And I think that's really what resulted in subsequently the work I've done. But it started with the seed of as a designer responding to my son's education and saying, there has to be a better way. And what if? So I had the luxury of asking that question.
Wonderful. Just to quickly switch to Akash. Akash, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Quest Alliance is up to?
Yeah, so I mean, I got into doing this work also. I failed my ninth standard, and I think that was a big sort of changing moment in my
Mm-hmm.
life where I had to deal with failure at an early age, and I think that's something that really helped me cope with a lot of emotions at a very early age in my life, and as I was transitioning from school to figuring out what I wanted to do in with my life, I started becoming a youth facilitator, which means I started working with other young people. And I think that process of just connecting with other young people gave me my own purpose of really facilitating career journeys for young adults, to help them see that being socially responsible, entrepreneurial, is the way to really find your own purpose. So I think that was a quick sort of introduction to my journey, and of course the role Kiran played in helping me also see my creative side, as part of going to her design studio as a young boy, also had a big part to play. Um, in
Yeah, for those of you who are listening, he's my nephew.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a very
Yeah.
special connection I have with Akash.
Yeah.
So, Akash, a little bit about Quest Alliance and the work that
Yes,
you
so
guys
a little
do.
bit about Quest. I think a lot of young people, almost I think out of the young people who come into the workforce in India or who find work in India, only I think 20% of them really do it in a planned way. They think about what they want to do before they enter. For most people, there is no plan. It's pretty much by influence of parents or by community members. So our work is really helping young people plan their careers from an early age, and then provide the skills to make decisions about which career is better for them, and connect with the right industry folks who can support them through internships, through jobs, etc. So that's kind of the core of what we do, and we work across secondary schools and vocational training, schools and vocational training. But yeah, that's kind of a brief.
So I have one question and then we'll throw it open. I know Zhao's itching to go. So one of the themes that connects the work that both of you do is this idea of self-learning or learner-driven. And, Kiran, you spoke about sort of the user-centered idea that you bring from design. I would like to, each of you to talk a little bit about what that means in your context, because, you're working with slightly different populations here. But it seemed to me that is something that when I was looking over, your profiles and just knowing the work that you guys do, that seems to be at heart of it. And so would love to have each of you speak a little bit about that. Kiran, maybe you can
Yeah.
kick us off, and then Akash.
I think since I work with really young children, I realized very early on that there are three lenses by which we look at our young learners. One is gender, and in many parts of the world, gender shapes the way our children learn. The one is demographics, where you're born determines where you go, and that's another kind of a lens that comes in, or a filter. But the third that I find that truly diminishes a child's potential is age. We kind of say, oh, you're young, not now, when you're older, and you kind of defer the promise of children potential every year. We say, not now. And now you have to sit down. Now you have to listen. Now you have to study. Now you have to, sit for exams. And then finally, 15 years later, we say, my God, what's happened? Where are our children? Where are these young citizens? And I keep saying that, we keep finding it so surprising that in the first 2 years of our children's life, any child's life on the planet, the child goes and shows us the potential that they have. They go from crawling to sitting, standing, running, laughing, thinking, speaking, and telling us, look at me, I can. And then we send them to school and we say, now keep quiet. Now keep quiet for 15 years. And I think so I believe that that's the irony in this understanding of potential and self, not even self-directed, just the simple trust in potential, human potential. And so I believe that what I saw with children at Riverside was how they became initiators, they became participants, they became overseers of their learning journey. And I think that very early on established that as a given fact. And I think that's really what we don't do enough in education. Um, and we always look in hindsight. We say, oh, if I had and if I could. So I believe the recognition that ability is inherent, but quality is learned. I mean, that's really what education can allow. But ability is inherent in every child. I mean, no matter where the child is born. So that if you harness, and that if you nurture, and that if you elevate, pretty much the rest of it gets taken care of. So in the first 15 years of a child's life, through whatever we call this educational journey or schooling, that's really where you plant the seeds. And those seeds set root in the heart and the mind of a child. And it's nurtured by trust, and it's nurtured by empathy, and it's nurtured by opportunity. And then eventually you graduate children and citizens that take that reality for a given state. And you say, yes, I'm here to be the change. I mean, that's really, I'm harking back on Gandhiji's thing, but it is not an unusual frame of mind at all. It just starts with that belief that age, gender, and demographics are not filters for learning. And if you remove these, and then you kind of eliminate that fear, you illuminate the child. So I think that's really what we learned. And I think eventually it offered us the potential to take that same sort of framework through Design for Change to now 60 countries. And we see that across the world, the act of belief and trust. So yeah,
Thank you.
nothing unusual, nothing surprising.
No, but I think at one level, not unusual, but I think at another level, it's kind of sad that how unusual it actually is, in the sense that bringing the learner into that equation is something that we pay lip service to, but rarely if ever happens. Aakash?
Yeah, so for us, I think the whole idea of self, right? How do you understand self, and then how do you connect the self to the family, which is the first space that you have understood values, and you've understood the world, you've seen it through that lens. You want to be able to, we try to look at connecting the self with the family, with the career. There are many different career opportunities out there, but you're not able to, again, see the influence that your family has on your career decision. So through the lens of family, also explore the world of work. What are the different work opportunities? And finally, being able to make a difference in the community. Purposeful work is about really taking what you have learned and the opportunities you see and make an impact in the community. So in our work, we try to also help young people connect these dots between the self, the influences that the family is having on you and your mindset, exploring what are your options in the world of work, and then finally helping you look at making a meaningful contribution in the community. So that is the kind of thinking we use in our work, and we do that through different kind of.
Thank you. I know Zhao and Kurt are all hopping, and a couple of people have already posted to the chat how excited they are about this episode and the complex set of issues we are discussing. So we have a fan, Kiran, somebody, Priyank, who's a regular listener, viewer of the show, has been waiting for this episode and is glad to join. All right, Zhao,
Yeah,
on
Priyank.
So this is I have to say I'm very biased because I've been writing and doing research on creativity and entrepreneur spirit for a long time. So what you describe here, I'm just saying this is exciting. This is great. So I have a question for Karen, is that because when you were saying about you started school because your child went to school, I've seen a lot of stories like that. There are people, who started their own school, and many of them come from design arts. So that's very interesting. There's a school in Idaho, the One Stone School. There's the Ross School in New York. A lot of people do that, but also, I say a lot. I mean, number, like maybe no more than really 20. I say that, okay. But really, the majority of parents, I do believe that every parent cares about the child's education. So majority of parents in the world are stuck with what their schools are. And then you have another small percentage of parents who have the money, the power to choose schools. But you started a school. So that is something. And I also look at Punya. Punya is like a designer, just kind of, forget about it. I'm into education. So you guys are more accidental education people who are leading into the future. I'm very fascinated by this phenomena because you are not dragged down by history or by tradition, but instead you invented something. So the inventiveness of that. And I'm hoping all parents, technically today with YouTube and everything, every parent can start a school for their children if they want to do that, if they want to do. So I'm just curious to say, what would you share with other parents? Because today I'm really saying that we can have a global school at any time if you want to do it. So the way you're trying to ask children to say, find a problem, solve it. That's precisely my approach. I call it product-oriented learning in a book I wrote a long time ago, that you find it, you solve the problem. So what kind of message would you share with parents, teachers, when children do have access to a global market, a global, resources? What would you say, Kiran? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So, I think a lot of what I learned was from the children. And I think the one thing they taught me was to slow down and listen. I think that act of listening builds a bridge between the learner and the adult of trust. And that's a phenomenal gift to give another person, right? The idea of trust. So I learned very early on that most adults love speaking, telling, informing, instructing, and that act, and in a misguided way, to say, because I love you, so I have to tell you what to do, and I have to direct you, and I have to show you. And all the child is doing is listening to say, will you listen? This bothers me. And what bothers children is often a very personal act. It could be nobody sitting with me and having lunch, or I don't get, my school bag is heavy, or I don't, the bathrooms are smelly. And the moment an adult tells them, oh no, that's not important. That's not important. You should be bothered by global warming, and you should be bothered about environment. You kind of are telling this child to step one step back, and say, okay, me and myself, like what Aakash said about the self, doesn't matter, and as long as I fit into your frame of reference, then I'm okay. So I think what I have learned and what the children have asked me is to please listen, not just to my words, but the way my body moves, and the way my eyes sparkle, and the way I smile, and the way what I'm saying. What I'm not saying, listen to me. What I'm not telling you, listen. And we don't slow down long enough to listen. So with parents, because in this hyperactive, frenetic pace of change, etc., I find that slowing down is a great act and a great service.
Well,
I think for me, that's what I've learned. Sorry?
So that's what you've learned. I'm really curious, before you've learned all of this, when you decide to do something. But also, there's another question for you. We are all here, we're professors. You know what professors do? We write papers. So it sounds like you're a designer. I've been questioning this for a long time, so you're a designer. You come in, you discover just watching, listening, waiting for the children. I agree with you. So you did not read all these tens, hundreds of thousands of pieces of articles published by education researchers. They're kind of junk and useless. So basically, you did not read them. You probably read some books about children, some psychology books, but it's really your own insight. So basically, you're telling us all educational research can go to junk. We don't need them. You are running, you're doing that. No, Aakash, you can jump in, because No, I'm not joking now, because most
Yeah, I
education
have to say,
research is
no,
about the
no.
past. So tell
Yes,
us something about that.
yeah, well, I have to say that while intuition is fantastic, and I would respond to that greatly, intuition alone is not the responsibility you have. And I think that's what I learned. Whilst I brought in the act of user-centeredness because that was such a given, such a common sense idea, I kept thinking, my God, why are we not listening to children? So that was the common sense part. But because it didn't come from education, I believe I needed to have the humility to know what I didn't know. So I think then that was a big dose that I had to also recognize that in service, not only your intuition and your common sense works, but sometimes you need to go back to those papers. Not many of them, I have to say, but definitely a few. Yes, that's what I have learned. Akash?
Akash?
Akash, you have any comments on that question? I'm not trashing education researchers. So we are
Yeah.
still
Yes, you are.
people, but
Yes, you are, but that's okay. But that's okay. All right, Akash.
So I can add 2 points. I think one is definitely, agree with the point that, how young people also are looked at as problems to solve by adults, and how they are not really looked at as problem solvers. So it's the adults also who need to change their point of view on young people, because oftentimes they are told what subjects to learn, which careers to take, whereas young people have that sort of curiosity to explore and try new things and fail and so on. So I think that shift in adults can make a big difference. On the point of the second point, I am a big fan of professors who write papers about various different papers and consolidating them into one paper. So Punya, for example, has written, and has assimilated 21st century skills. He's reviewed so many papers and put one paper. So I love those kinds of things, because that gives me an insight into a lot of knowledge by just reading one of them. So that's an input to all of you as well.
Yeah, synthesize it, give it to me in a
Yes.
nutshell. Believe me, I can manage the rest.
you guys are great. So this
Thank
is
you. Thank you for salvaging a little bit of our academic, dignity after Zao stripped us bare. So, Kurt, I know you've been waiting. Oh, do you want me to go with Priyank's question first,
Sure,
Kurt?
you can go ahead with that.
All right. So Priyank has a question, which is why do most alternate schools in India tend to function only till 8th grade? And do you see Riverside in the context of marginalized communities and thinking of having more contextual Riversides?
Well, I don't think, I have this real big problem about alternative schools. I just feel every other school that gets children to sit in rows is the alternative to actual learning. I would like to believe it's so common sense that children should talk to each other. So every other school that makes them not talk is the alternative model. So I would actually flip that.
Flip that.
Having said that, I think I believe, I don't know when Priyank left India, so I don't know what his reference
No,
point
no,
is, but I do believe
Priyank
a
is
lot.
in India.
Oh, hi, Priyank. Okay, so whatever it is, but I think there are lots more schools now that are taking the whole K through 12 and taking it up. So common sense, let me tell you, Riverside is not an experimental or highly, I think whatever we're doing is just so much common sense and it's not an elitist idea. Common sense is not elitist. Common sense actually is universal. And that's really what I want to say. When you fit to context, the idea that children should speak to other, children should engage with problems, children should be listened. None of this requires resources. Unfortunately, we again come back to that lens thinking scarcity. When we think scarcity, then we give a scarcity model and we don't really believe and trust. So for me, the idea of the fact that simple universal principles of learning will work anywhere, because all children respond to love, trust, relevance, relationships, and rigor. There's not a child in the world that says, no, 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 please don't tell me why I should learn anything, just tell me what. So I think, yes, this is possible across every demographic, across every kind of profile of schools. So we're working, in fact, with Riverside, we're working with right from schools in after school programs, right to schools from government things, right, and right across. So I find that the universal principles of learning apply no matter what. So, and we are not alternative, Mr. Priyank. Just letting you know that.
And I think just building on that point, and that's a conversation we've been having with Riverside as well around, a lot of processes that schools have can be taken to, say, remote schools that probably don't have that exposure or that mindset to learn processes, maybe how to do a morning assembly, how to run a small micro process at a school level. So some of those ideas, or how to do a sports day, that is interesting. So I think a lot of these processes are transferable to a lot more schools, and I think that's something that is work in progress, that we need to take these processes and build a network that's much bigger and can be transferable.
Yeah.
Right, Kurt, I know you've been waiting patiently.
I've enjoyed this, and I enjoyed last night because I watched your videos, and I didn't go to bed till, I don't know, 3 or 4, just because the videos were so exciting, and I want you to do some more and send them our way. I disagree a little bit with the comment we're taught to keep quiet for 15 years. For many of us, it's much longer than that. We're taught to be quiet.
That's true. And in some countries for life.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, unfortunately, some graduate programs don't allow self-initiation, but fortunately mine did allow it. In one of your TED Talk, and I'm jealous of, and I bow to anyone who has a TED Talk, you talk about humanness, and you talk about the ease of humanness. And so you did mention COVID and online learnings. And so this show kind of came as a result of COVID and people moving to online and distance learning environments. So my question is how to foster this human citizen that you talked about. And by the way, I have a different question for Aakash, but if he wants to jump to that, I have 2 questions. But how to foster this human citizenness with empathy, ethics, and excellence in online programs? And a little smaller question, you gave some data, some numbers of impact. Can you talk about some of the numbers of schools you're in and students you're impacting? So a 2-part question for you, Kiran.
That's a terrific question, but I do believe the Riverside had a heads up, because for the 20 years prior to COVID, we had developed a culture where this was embedded in everything that we did. Had we not done that, and had we not fostered and nurtured this culture over time, it's less likely that one could have done it only over the internet. So I keep saying that I'm now a firm believer that it's cultures that build mindsets. It's not just a one-off or a maverick teacher, etc. So I believe that because we had a deep pool of the fact that we could pull from. When we went online, a lot of those processes were able to be translated online. We maintained a lot of that connection. We made sure that the children were listened to. We made sure that the templates allowed it. But of course, nothing, in my opinion, ever sort of can duplicate a face-to-face interaction. Having said that, we did ride on the 20 years. And I found that a lot of the schools that were struggling had not built deep culture, where this resided in every nook and cranny of the place. And if you didn't have that, online proved to be a bit of a challenge. So for us, I think that was a big safety net, and we built on that. So that was one. When you're talking about data, you're asking in terms of numbers of impact to Riverside? I'm not quite sure. Riverside? Well, I have to just say that Riverside started with 26 children, and our impact is now over 3 million. So that's the short story, short line.
That's what the number I wanted you to get across. I'm not sure if the audience was aware of this. That's huge. Yeah. It's beyond India, right? You're in a number of countries.
Oh, yes.
Is it,
how many countries?
60 countries. You may have mentioned it earlier, but yeah. So, Aakash, I watched some of your videos as well, and couple things, but I'll ask one now, and then we have some other questions from the audience. Maybe I'll come back and ask another one later. You talk about the previously, and content is king, you know, in one of the videos. But you want to move it to, you know, the learner as innovator, and the design experience being more important, much more important than the content. And early on, you talked about in the Quest Alliance or Quest to Learn that you want really some self-directedness in the learners and some entrepreneurial and innovation. I wonder if you could list some of the principles of self-directed learning or self-initiated learning that you try to promote within your program. Because I've been researching the last few years self-directed learning in massive open online courses, MOOCs, and have come up with a list of 20. I'm curious if any of yours match mine. So could you kind of give us a brief perspective on that?
Sure. And I think the content is king question or thought came actually from the point, you know, that there is so much time and effort spent in designing content. And then when you give it out and put it in the hands of the learner is really going to make it, you know, do what they want with it. An example would be, you know, you've not designed for disabled learners, but they will use apps and make it disabled friendly. And so they are the ones who are innovating. And so you need to really, you know, trust the learner to also be able to make meaning of that content. In terms of the principles that, you know, we've used, one, I think is definitely a lot of deep connection with self, which is key, and how do you really build reflection into using self as really the starting point. And so that's one key thing we've done. A lot of work on intergenerational conversations with parents, with industry, where you go out and really provide triggers to interview, you know, grandparents, interview parents, interview, you know, the local person working on the potter's wheel, who can, you know, give you insights about their profession. So a lot of that intergenerational conversation that gets passed on is another one. I think how you negotiate power and authority, and how do you really have conversations of power, shifting power, is another one that we've used. Simple things like, you know, where students come in and make presentations to parents about what they are finding in these conversations, and how parents' perceptions start changing about learners, and learners start getting that confidence in themselves. So yeah, I think these are a few things that we've been actively doing in terms of you know, shifting the conversation towards more self-directed. Um, and I think the other piece is really the fear which often comes with learning, and how technology has really shifted that, because what we really see is learners who are learning online, the ones who are otherwise who are slower or who are less proficient, tend to engage with online learning, at least in a controlled way, a lot more, because no one's judging them, to say, you know, I'm asking you the same question 3 times, but I can keep repeating that same slide over and over again till I really get it, or ask my you know, peers anonymous questions. I think anonymous questions have also worked quite well in this context. So I think breaking the fear of learning by through technology, I think is another one which has really worked well for us.
Some of those things overlap with a program called Foxfire, which was in the state of Georgia 50 years ago, where kids would interview people in the community, and through that process, they would write chapters that would go in books that get published, or it'd end up in doctors' offices. They had about 20 different principles of relevance, and you know, I go on. Maybe I'll send those to you. It's called the Foxfire approach. in northern Georgia it was.
So we have so many questions popping up. I don't think we can get through all of them, but there was a comment from Ragini Lal, who's watching the YouTube channel, that in the Indian context, listening to children or young adults is a revolutionary act. It goes on to say, as adults, most Indians struggle to be heard within their own family. And Shuange joined in and said China and other Eastern Asian contexts would share Ragini's concerns as well. So I just thought I would just throw that in there. So Chris had a question.
No, I have to actually add to that to say that because we've been told that if we speak, it is disrespectful. So we've equated the act of a voice with disrespect. And that's what we have controlled. So I think so much of it has been positioned as an act of disrespect, etc. And that's seen as culture, which isn't true at all. So I think that's really where the great misunderstanding of this idea is.
Right. And before I jump to Chris's question, something that came up, Kiran, that you spoke about, and I know Aakash, you share that as well, is this idea of designing for culture. And even the examples that we have seen, if I remember, we had another designer turned educator on the show a while back. And even he spoke about how the design of their school allowed them to deal with the pandemic very differently from other ones. But Chris has a question, which I'll sort of twist a little bit to cover both of you. So Chris's question was, how do graduates in the school fare when they move into more traditional educational systems? And Priyank sort of followed up on that how do they feel in colleges or universities where learners don't have agency? And Aakash, sort of a version of the question for you is, when you're working with youth and giving them these opportunities, and then now they have to end up in maybe more traditional workspaces, how has that transition been? So Kiran, if you can go first, and then we'll go with Aakash.
They do marvelously, I have to say. We've had 8 batches that have graduated, and we have kept in touch with them. In fact, one of the requirements for every graduate is to ensure that they write back to us and come and meet us. I have to say it has been the most gratifying experience. I'll talk about 2 instances about not only are they navigating it, they are like having fun. And one thing that came out, we asked them, I said, what have we not taught you? And they said, you've not taught us to be disrespectful to, the point is that they find so many of their peers sitting in a class, not listening, being disrespectful, not, offering that idea of a conversation with the adult, and they find that completely unusual. So that's really been an interesting, but deeper, I think what our girls have said is they've had the power to say no. And I think that's been fantastic to hear. To have my girls come back and say, ma'am, we have no problems, we can say no. And to gift a child, and especially a girl, that confidence to say no is super, super important. The other thing with my boys, I remember one of my boys went to a very traditional engineering college, and he wrote back to me saying, okay, ma'am, when I went to the canteen and I finished my food and I said thank you, and I'm lifting the plate to go back to the space, all my friends laughed at me that I said thank you to the canteen boy. And today, I mean, those little acts, forget academic, they're like all stars and they're in Dean's College list. But I think what they're recognizing is that they can make their space a little better. And that onus, that circle of influence in that little corner of the world, that they can make a little bit more just, a little bit more equitable. Now that is the power of education. That's what you offer. And I think very often children are not told about that. They're not talked about. They're saying, just get in. Everything else doesn't matter. And so I believe that when you provide children that confidence that they can not just navigate, but they have to shape it a little bit and their world a little better, you will find that there will be remarkable stories that they will send back. So it's been really, really good. And I have this problem with, traditional colleges or anything else. I don't think the format or the style of the college matters at all. It is finally you and what you will do in there. So I think that's really where our graduates have actually given us. And anybody who's wanting to do a little bit more study on the School Riverside website, there's a little link that says alumni. I would encourage you to go there. And there are 2 little sort of PDFs called Alumni Speak. And they are emails that our children have written back to us. It is delightful reading. I'm saying a Sunday well spent.
Thank you. Aakash? How about the people you're working with who now end up in more traditional contexts and so on, or workspaces?
Yeah, I think a lot of people we work with are, first time entering the formal labor market and are getting their first jobs, which are oftentimes the first job. You're oftentimes struggling with your first job. You are aspiring for much more, and then you have to accept something really that doesn't that's not in line with your aspiration. So we have, say, a girl who wanted to go and do a nursing course, but the family couldn't afford to send her to that course, and so she had to start with a job at a cafe coffee day, doing customer interaction and working her way to earn money and save money so that she can do that nursing course. So oftentimes a lot of young people look at that first job as a big dream, but it's really a first stepping stone to something bigger, and that first job teaches you some of the skills that you need to then use in life. That's going to shape your life. So I think that's the paradigm that we drive as well with young people, that your first job, you can just take it as it comes. You learn something, but how that helps you think about your longer term future is what really is important.
So I love that, because I think what I hear from both of you is that the this focus on the self and a sense of becoming, that it is always, seeing this longer arc. And I think that's something that is so denied to students and learners in schools is, it's always, it'll happen, like, trust me, this will be useful tomorrow, 6 years from now, and so on and so forth. And I think that that's a really powerful idea. So Zhao, Kurt, any questions before I take some?
I was just
dropped in
going
the
to,
chat?
Punya,
ahead.
thanks for asking. I want to just follow up with your question. Yours thing, the readiness mindset has dominated education forever, right? First grade is ready for second grade is ready for third grade. You're always ready for something you will never get to do. So that's just what happens in education, right? We'll always get you ready because you never need that. So both I think Kiran and Aakash, you've done something really amazing against culture. Even in the US, actually, we have the same thing, the culture of schooling. So that's and since almost all our listeners want to do something like what you've done. Okay, so you're an amazing person, and but you're also extraordinary. You've done extraordinary things. Everyone wants to do something like you've done. Start something new. Try to rub, at least our audience. Just share with us. You must have run into problems. Okay, so when you say, what kind of problems have you run into? Because that's what holds people back. People say, well, I want to do this. I don't have money. It doesn't matter if I have money. My life is very much like, so yeah, go do it. But I want to hear from you some of the challenges, cultural, financial, administrative, personnel, just anything you'd like to share. This is how you overcome them.
You want to go first?
Oh, Aakash,
We can
go
have
first.
a list.
No, you go.
Well, I have to just share with you. I mean, I keep telling people that the day I set up to start the Riverside School, and I was getting the first lot of 20 odd phone call, people call to say, okay, where is the school? I want to see it. The 26th of Jan, 2001. I was getting them to come to see the school. 8:45 in the morning, Zhao. I'm getting ready to come, and the earthquake hit. The biggest earthquake that hit the state hit on that day at that time at 8:45 in the morning. Everything collapsed. Everything. Forget it. Forget the parents. They didn't come. The teacher who was going to be with me left. Parents left. The building was damaged. Everything that could go wrong went wrong on that very day. Now, that's a fantastic excuse not to do anything. I mean, nature is telling you, listen, boss, you better be scared. Now you could either take it that way, or the reverse is true. If today, of course, in hindsight, the fact that I started still in June, I have to say that there will always be earthquakes, small, big, they're all going to happen in multiple times. It's how you deal with it and how you come out through that. I think that's really going to be what you will find about yourself. So I would say it's not the fear that determines it. It is just the fact that, boss, it's not going to be easy. It's all of everybody talks about success as if, my God, it's the pain you're willing to endure. It's the stamina you want to have. I've seen too many young people with this is the idea that is going to change the world. And in 2 years, I don't find them at all. I keep saying the world has an idea. We have too many ideas, but we don't have the grit and the stamina to stay with the idea long enough. So I would recommend to anybody, whatever it is, remember this is a marathon. You have to have stamina. Stamina more than talent. I have to say talent is overrated. You have stamina, have a sense of humor, and be shameless. That's it. That's my formula.
Karen, that's a life philosophy. I think that's all innovators will have to share. If you want to lead something, you have to do that. You don't have to go through earthquakes and go through all kinds of problems, but that's something. I gotta go visit Riverside. Aakash, what kind of problems you might have had? Not earthquakes. Okay, you gotta have something else.
Yeah. So I think when I came in and wanted to start, I was about 24 years old, and I thought that I'll be doing, and a lot of my work was to bring large corporations, NGOs, governments all together on the same table and think about a common vision for education technology in India, and be able to come up with new ideas. And I was trying to
24.
facilitate these conversations, being at 24. And I think maybe at that time I was really enthusiastic about this idea, and that kept me going. But there was definitely self-doubt that should I be doing this at this age? I thought I'll do this when I'm 40, or and here I am much earlier trying to facilitate this. So I think there was that. That was definitely one challenge, to align stakeholders on a common vision and being able to invest in that vision, where different people have really different needs. I think the other one was in really building a team which would be there for the marathon and really want to be there together trying to figure things out, where you oftentimes try to have this notion of a leader, that's one leader with all the ideas, whereas you want to really have co-travelers, co-ownership to the process. And so how do you be vulnerable, be open to accepting your own kind of shortcomings and failures, and be able to really lead with that, as opposed to lead with this notion of I have the answers and you got to follow. So I think that process of transforming myself as that person, but also building that culture with team members, I think that was definitely, I would say, a challenge.
Yeah. I'm glad, Aakash, you mentioned that, because one of the things when I've visited Quest and worked with your team, it's a very different feel that I get than working with many other organizations in India, where there is a lot more, like you said, Kiran, a lot more humor, a lot more laughter. And I think that's an indicator of people being comfortable in sharing ideas, pulling each other's legs, making fun of each other, but being very serious about the work, but not being sort of take the work seriously, don't take yourself seriously. That's a really within that cultural context can actually be difficult. And so that's a completely another conversation I think we could have about how one builds organizations which have, and that inherently builds resilience in ways, and ownership and shared agency and ownership. I think that's really powerful. But I'm looking at the time, we are getting close. So there's a question from Chris, which I think would like to go with, which is, are there strategies from Riverside or Aakash, the work that you do, that more traditional organizations that schools can adopt, even if they don't want to completely go the student-driven or the learner-driven route? Like, are there things that you feel that can more traditional organizations can pick up on? Whoever wants to go first. Aakash, why don't you go first this time?
So I think some simple things that we've attempted, things like making some of the learning visible by really putting the learners' work out in various community spaces, taking the ideas from school and bringing them to the community, and bringing the community inside the school as well. So the potter's wheel is used to also talk about the solar system, and how you can bring that local knowledge to learners. I think that's been I think in contexts like Bihar, Jharkhand, which are fairly remote areas, you got to work with those local resources. So I would say that's definitely been one strategy that we've used that could
Okay.
be relevant anywhere.
Thank you.
I would
Kiran?
say space. I think reimagining space. One thing that we don't have a principal's office. We don't have a staff room. I think the more physical barriers you put between yourself and the learner or the user, whoever the user might be, the more mental barriers are created. So we've just removed all of that. So my office, if I'm supposed to be director and principal, can be under a tree. So I find that accessibility and transparency are critical. And in many ways, just removing those barriers also, in a way, invite conversation. And I find that most people, I keep telling principals who say, "What can I do?" I said, "Well, just get out of your office, put your table out on the corridor and watch the conversations happen." And it surprises them that something as simple as that, in their heads, it still seems that I don't want hierarchy. They tell mentally, but they're physically away from the people. So I would say being accessible, being transparent, and being visible are remarkable ways in which you can just start a different culture in your space.
Yeah, I'm reminded of one of our previous guests, Sean Lesher, who runs these urban discovery schools in San Diego. He has this lovely blog post about the meaning of the location of the teacher's desk. You know, if it's in the front of the room, it signifies something. If it is on the side, it becomes a shared workspace. And suddenly there's just a switch in power. And so Sean and I were talking the other day, and he was joking that now in their school, their discussion is about how you are framed on Zoom, because that's all we have as a way of, because these moves communicate.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
All of these things
absolutely. They give a
communicate.
message. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that is really, I think the example that you gave, and Aakash, both of you, which is sort of removing these barriers, because if you think, Aakash, what you're doing when you're talking about take the school into the community and vice versa, you are taking these barriers. I mean, that is one of the saddest things, really, if I think about it, is that what we have created are these buildings, and learning happens there. So you go in at 7 or 8 or whatever time in the morning until 2 o'clock, you learn, and then life. And that is just such a fake distinction, but that's what we have done. And in some ways, I think if we talk about silver lining in the pandemic, it has really, if you talk to educators and teachers now, they actually know their students a little better, their context a little better, because suddenly they have a portal into their lives, which otherwise they were, in India, every kid has this uniform, and think of the word uniform. Like, what does just that word signify? Like, we have flattened all of you are little, automatons who learn lockstep and go the same way. It's a really potent sort of word when you think about it. I know, Kurt, you have a question, and then I think, Kurt, once we get the responses, you get to introduce whoever our guests are for the next week.
Okay. Kish, when I was watching the first of your videos, you talked about blended learning being used during COVID times, and the difficult thing being the facilitators and the training of the facilitators. And so I want to ask either of you, I've read a lot about within India using open educational resources, whether it's the Khan Academy videos or whatnot. If you are, the training of facilitators for a blended experience is extremely important, so the students aren't solitary and just heading off on their own, not really, coming to grips with the knowledge that they're accumulating and what it means to them. So would either one of you like to talk about the facilitators within a blended learning environment during COVID times?
Yeah, I think I can go on that. I think the interesting part with facilitators in blended learning during COVID times has been for us that we've been able to really, the point I was making around how the overcoming the inhibitions part, where some students, for example, are given projects to do with the community, in the communities that they are operating in, and how we are able to bring those stories and provide platforms for students to share, learners to share those stories, and facilitators are really providing the space, rather than, because students are bored with Zoom lectures and we can't use the physical space, the same principles of physical space in a virtual space. We got to use the virtual space, or the virtual space, for what it's good at. You want students to go out, learn new skills, whether it's making videos, whether it's watching lectures, come back to some of the classrooms to share what they are learning from the time they have, as opposed to trying to lecture them. So I think that shift is what happened, where the facilitators also started looking at in a kind of e-learning platform context, started looking at more data, more analysis around how students are learning, what are some of the patterns that they are finding, and started getting the community forums more active. The training of those facilitators is something that we've kind of built a blended learning course for them to learn those skills.
Kiran, would you like to add any final comment before we transition to next week?
Well, I think a big thing that we learned was humility and vulnerability. We didn't know shit. And it was a completely new space. So I think suddenly the distinction between learner and teacher was just dissolved. I think we suddenly realized that there was just so much on the tech space that we had to learn from our kids. And so it became such an easy relationship to say, I don't know, and I'm learning. And then that authenticity and that ease allowed the learning moment to be that much richer. So there was no teacher trying to fake it or the facilitator to kind of say, listen, I think I've got it. So we constantly were an iterative process. So that was fantastic. We just kept being in an iterative space. Is it working? And we did little design charrettes with the kids and with the parents to say what works, length of time, duration, template, all of the things that we didn't know anything about. So I believe that what we went back to was our natural way of iteration and user-centered designs, because it was for the first time for all of us. So we just resorted to that disposition. And I think what we finally what emerged from that was a really sound basis for understanding engagement, motivation, and accountability. So I think that was what we learned.
Pune, can I just say one word? So the whole thing from our silver lining for learning,
That was more than one word, Zell.
Simplified our philosophy. If you want to do something, just do it. And you will be
now you're plugging Nike now.
I live in a Nike country, so don't worry.
That is true.
That
is true.
Yeah.
So, the comments there, just really appreciative of both of you joining us. The two speakers are fantastic. And this is, somebody just commented that this is the best way to wake a learner up today. So early in the morning, they're enthused. So before I pass on to Kurt, I just want to again thank both of you for joining us for this conversation. It was awesome. And one of the things that comment dropped in said that the stories are contagious and inspiring. And I was laughing when I was describing you guys coming up in the previous episode, and I've got this quote, which I think, Kiran, you said in pre-pandemic times, and saying that the pandemic effect of doing good. We don't often associate pandemic and good anymore, but I think that I think what this episode speaks to is the power of ideas, of good ideas, of laughter and passion and inspiration, and those being contagious. So thank you very much for spending this time with us late in the evening today. And with that, Kurt, I will let you introduce the next episode. When we are done, Zhao just switches off the YouTube channel. We can continue chatting, just to let you know. So, Kurt.
Yeah, and by the way, the videos that I watched are linked within the blog post. So go to Punya's brilliant blog post and watch some of their videos. Aakash and Kiran's, they're brilliant, and you'll enjoy them. So if you want to do something later on in the day and come back to this, next week we have someone who was a rock star, who is now a rock star. He was a rock and roll musician, got into the field of educational technology by running virtual planetariums, of all things, and found his way to Indiana University and got his doctorate. And after that, he got involved in the academic collab, academic distributed learning lab for the Army, and it was in Madison, Wisconsin, where he also was an assistant dean creating alternative degree programs. And he's now moved on to another UW with Red, University of Washington, where he's creating alternative credentialing as well in a 60-year curriculum, and the Continuum College, not outreach and extension, but the Continuum College, continuing with their education throughout life. And that the person we have coming in, his name is Rovi Brandon. He has long hair like me. He's my idol for he and I maybe can start a rock band after this. So you'll enjoy Rovi, and I welcome you all to come at the normal time at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, and the blog post is already up on that. So I hope you all can join us.